This is the 39th time we are on the Anguttara Nikaya Suttas. We are at the 4th book, chapter of the 7th. Now we come to Sutta number 7.7.63. The Buddha said, Monks, when a Raja's citadel in the frontiers is well provided with the 7 requisites of a fortress, and can obtain at will, easily and without trouble, the 4 kinds of supplies, it is said to be one that cannot be undone by outside foe or treacherous ally. With what 7 requisites of a fortress is it well provided? Monks, there is in a Raja's citadel in the frontiers the pillar, deeply embedded, well dug in, immovable and unshakable. With this first fortress requisite is the Raja's citadel in the frontiers well provided, for the protection of the inmates and for the warding off of outsiders. Monks, there is the moat, both deep and wide. With this second requisite is it well provided. There is the road going round the citadel. With this third requisite is it well provided. There is the great armory of spear and sword. With this 4th requisite is it well provided. There is the large body of troops stationed in the citadel, that is to say, mahouts, horsemen, charioteers, bowmen, standard-bearers, billeting officers, soldiers of the supply corps, noted Raja's sons, storm troops, men as brave as mighty Nagas, valiants, warriors in armor, and home-born slaves. With this 5th requisite is it well provided. There is the gatekeeper, clever, intelligent, wise, who refuses entrance to the unknown, but admits those he knows. With this 6th requisite is it well provided. Then monks, there is in the Raja's citadel, in the frontiers, the rampart, both high and wide, covered with a coat of plaster. With this 7th requisite is the Raja's citadel well provided, for the protection of the inmates and for the warding off of outsiders. With these 7 fortress requisites is it well provided. And what are the 4 kinds of supplies it can obtain at will, easily and without trouble? There are in the Raja's citadel in the frontiers great stores of grass, wood and water, for the convenience of the inmates, for their comfort, for their well-being, and for the warding off of outsiders. There are great stores of rice and corn for the convenience of the inmates. There are great stores of sesame, beans, vetches of fodder, and cereals for the convenience of the inmates. Then monks, there are in the Raja's citadel in the frontiers great stores of medicines, that is to say, ghee, fresh butter, oil, honey, sugar and salt, for the convenience of the inmates, for their comfort, for their well-being, and for the warding off of outsiders. These are the 4 kinds of supplies it can obtain at will, easily and without trouble. Verily, monks, when a Raja's citadel in the frontiers is well provided with these 7 requisites, and can obtain at will, easily and without trouble, these 4 kinds of supplies, it is said to be one which cannot be undone by outside foe or treacherous ally. In just the same way, monks, when an Aryan disciple is possessed of 7 excellent things, and can obtain at will, easily and without trouble, 4 jhanas of the higher mind, bringing comfort here now, the Aryan disciple is said to be one who cannot be undone by Mara, undone by the evil one. Of what 7 excellent things is he possessed? Just as a Raja's citadel in the frontiers has the pillar deeply embedded, well dug in, immovable and unshakable, for the protection of the inmates and for the warding off of outsiders, even so, monks, an Aryan disciple has faith. He believes in the Tathagata's awakening. Of a truth, he is the exalted one, Arahant, Sammasambuddha, complete with knowledge and practice. Well gone one, world knower, incomparable tamer of tameable men, teacher of devas and men, exalted one. With faith as a pillar, the Aryan disciple abandons unwholesome states and makes wholesome states become. He abandons what is blameworthy. He makes blamelessness become. He bears himself in pureness. With this first excellent thing is he possessed. Just as the citadel has a moat, both deep and wide, for the protection of the inmates, even so monks, an Aryan disciple is conscientious. He is ashamed of misconducting himself in deed, word and thought, ashamed of falling into evil and unwholesome states. With conscientiousness as a moat, the Aryan disciple abandons unwholesome states and makes wholesome states become. Of this second excellent thing is he possessed. Just as the citadel has a road going round it, both high and wide, for the protection of the inmates, even so monks, an Aryan disciple has remorse. He feels remorse for misconduct in deed, word and thought. He feels remorse having fallen into evil and unwholesome states. With remorse as an encircling road, the Aryan disciple abandons unwholesome states and makes wholesome states become. Of this third excellent thing is he possessed. Just as the citadel has a great armory of spear and sword for the protection of the inmates, even so monks, an Aryan disciple has heard much, and there is a retaining, a storing of things heard. Those dharmas, lovely in the beginning, lovely in the middle, and lovely in the end, which set forth in meaning and detail the holy life, wholly fulfilled, perfectly pure, even those are learned by him, resolved upon, made familiar by speech, pondered over in mind, well penetrated by right view. With learning as an armory, the Aryan disciple abandons unwholesome states and makes wholesome states become. Of this fourth excellent thing is he possessed. Just as the citadel has a large body of troops stationed therein, that is to say, mahouts, cavalry, charioteers, bowmen and so forth, for the protection of the inmates, even so monks, an Aryan disciple abides stirred in energy or with sustained energy, to be rid of unwholesome states, to follow wholesome states, steadfast, firm in advance. He lays not aside the burden of wholesome states. With energy as an armed force, the Aryan disciple abandons unwholesome states and makes wholesome states become. Of this fifth excellent thing is he possessed. Just as the citadel has a gatekeeper, clever, intelligent and wise, who refuses entrance to the unknown, but admits those he knows for the protection of the inmates, even so monks, an Aryan disciple has mindfulness and is endowed in the highest degree with mindfulness and awareness. He remembers and calls to mind things done and said long ago. With mindfulness as a gatekeeper, the Aryan disciple abandons unwholesome states and makes wholesome states become. Of this sixth excellent thing is he possessed. Just as the Raja citadel in the frontiers has a rampart, both high and wide, covered with a coat of plaster for the protection of the inmates and for the warding off of outsiders, even so monks, the Aryan disciple has wisdom. Endowed is he with wisdom as to the nature of arising and cessation, with Aryan penetration of the way to the utter destruction of ill. With wisdom as a coat of plaster, the Aryan disciple abandons unwholesome states. He makes wholesome states become. He abandons what is blameworthy. He makes blamelessness become. He bears himself in pureness. Of this seventh excellent thing is he possessed. Of these seven excellent things is he possessed. What four jhanas of the higher mind, bringing comfort here and now, can he obtain at will, easily and without trouble? Just as in a Raja citadel in the frontiers there are great stores of grass, wood and water for the convenience of the inmates, for their comfort, for their well-being, and for the warding off of outsiders, even so monks, an Aryan disciple, aloof from sense desires, aloof from unwholesome states, enters and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of solitude. For his own convenience, for his own comfort, for his own well-being, and for faring to the cool. Just as in the citadel there are great stores of rice and corn for the convenience of the inmates, even so monks, an Aryan disciple with the stilling of applied and sustained thought enters and abides in the second jhana, which has internal self-confidence and singleness of mind, without applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of concentration, for his own convenience and for faring to the cool. Just as the citadel has great stores of sesame, beans, vetches and other cereals for the convenience of the inmates, even so monks, an Aryan disciple, with the fading away of delight, abides in equanimity, and mindful and aware, enters and abides in the third jhana, experiencing pleasure with the body, on account of which the Aryans declare, he that is equanimous and mindful has a joyful abiding, for his own convenience and for faring to the cool. Just as in the Raja citadel in the frontiers there are great stores of medicines, that is to say, ghee, fresh butter, oil, honey, sugar and salt, for the convenience of the inmates, for their comfort, for their well-being, and for the warding off of outsiders. Even so monks, an Aryan disciple, with the abandoning of bodily pleasure and the previous abandoning of bodily pain, by the fading away of joy and grief, enters and abides in the fourth jhana, which is the complete purity of mindfulness and equanimity, and has neither pain nor pleasure, for his own convenience, for his own comfort, for his well-being, and for faring to the cool. These are the four jhanas of the higher mind, bringing comfort here and now. He can obtain at will, easily and without trouble. Monks, when an Aryan disciple is possessed of these 7 excellent things and can obtain at will, easily and without trouble, these 4 jhanas, this Aryan disciple is said to be one who cannot be undone by Mara, undone by the evil one. That's the end of the sutta. This sutta is about the 7 excellent things, and the Pali name is the 7 Saddhamma. The 7 Saddhamma. This is one of the things to acquire on the spiritual path, on the holy path. There is a name for the Buddha which is called Vijacharana Sampanno, complete with knowledge and conduct or practice. The word charana can be translated as conduct or practice. It is the steps along the holy path. And the 7 Saddhamma are one of the things to be acquired along that holy path. What are these 7 things? The first one is saddha, having faith that the Buddha is the enlightened one. And the second one is hiri. Hiri is conscientiousness or conscience, having a conscience, to be ashamed of doing something wrong. Third one is ottappa. Ottappa is a sense of remorse, sense of guilt if you have done wrong. The fourth one is bahu sutta, much hearing of the Dhamma. In other words, much knowledge of the Dhamma. The Dhamma refers to the discourses of the Buddha, the words of the Buddha. And the fifth one is arada virya, stirred in energy or having sustained energy to get rid of unwholesome states and to cultivate wholesome states of mind. The sixth is sati. Sati is mindfulness, is generally translated as mindfulness, but you have to keep in mind the meaning of sati. Here, as in other suttas, the definition of sati is given as he remembers and calls to mind things done and said long ago. So sati is remembering. What is it that we have to remember? We have to remember, in this case, we have to remember that the body and the mind is not I, is not mine, is not the self. This is mentioned in the Sangyutta Nikaya, the Sangyutta on the 5 khandhas, the 5 things that we take to be the self, which are also body and mind. So that's the meaning of mindfulness here. It is not general mindfulness, because general mindfulness is not to do with Buddhist practice. Buddhist practice is a specific mindfulness of our mind and mindfulness of our body activities, and also the nature of the mind and the nature of the body. If you roam out into the other 5 sense doors, in the world of seeing, hearing, smelling, taste and touch, that is what the Buddha calls Mara's playground. And there are hooks. Mara is always trying to bait us, and if you are not careful, when you get caught by Mara, that means nice sights, nice sounds, nice smells, nice taste and pleasant touch. So that's the mindfulness. The 7th one is panya. Panya is wisdom. Wisdom here refers to wisdom as to the nature of arising and cessation of all things in the world, because all things in the world have the nature to arise and to pass away. And that is, if we know the nature of the arising and cessation of all things in the world, that is wisdom. So these are the 7 excellent things that a person on the holy path should cultivate. And in addition to that, if he can attain the 4 jhanas of the higher mind, then this Aryan disciple is said to be one who cannot be undone by Mara, cannot be undone by the evil one. So you see here just now there was a description of the 4 states of jhana. The first one, aloof from sense desires, aloof from unwholesome states. He enters and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of solitude. So you see the first jhana is a state which is aloof from sense desires. Sense desires is one of the 5 hindrances that obstruct wisdom, that obstruct us from seeing things as they really are. So the first state, the first jhana, is a state which is aloof from sensual desires. It is also aloof from unwholesome states. This state of jhana, the first jhana, is a very wholesome state. It has nothing to do with unwholesome states, because here it is defined as being aloof from unwholesome states. And in fact, it is a state of intense mindfulness. If you don't have intense mindfulness, you cannot enter into the first jhana. And some people have the wrong idea that jhana are states of unmindfulness. That is totally untrue. The second jhana is described as, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, he enters and abides in the second jhana, which has internal self-confidence and singleness of mind, without applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of concentration. This second jhana is a strong state of concentration, so strong that the applied and sustained thought cannot arise. No thoughts can arise, because it is extremely strong state of concentration. And because of that strong state of concentration, when a person attains the second jhana, he has internal self-confidence. He is quite confident in that concentration. The third one, with the fading away of delight, abides in equanimity, and mindful and aware, enters and abides in the third jhana. So you see, to enter the third jhana, this person must be mindful and aware. He enters and abides in the third jhana, experiencing pleasure with the body, on account of which the Aryans declare, he that is equanimous and mindful has a joyful abiding. So it's very clear from here also that this third jhana state is a very mindful and equanimous state. And the fourth jhana, with the abandoning of bodily pleasure and the previous abandoning of bodily pain, by the fading away of joy and grief, he enters and abides in the fourth jhana, which is the complete purity of mindfulness and equanimity, and has neither pain nor pleasure. So you see, this fourth jhana, the mindfulness is completely purified at the fourth jhana. So you cannot be more mindful then at the fourth jhana. That's why all these states of jhana are intense states of mindfulness, definitely very mindful states, not unmindful states. So, if a person possesses these 7 Saddhammas, excellent things, and the 4 jhanas, Mara has no way to bring him down, has no way to trap him, because he's beyond the reach of Mara. When a person enters the jhanas, and then when he comes out of it, the mind is... The hindrances are abandoned, It's quite clear from the previous sutta we read about Suneta, the external ascetic who cultivated metta and attained the jhanas. The Buddha said that even though he had not rooted out the hindrances, but the Buddha said he was completely free of lustful passions. That means he was completely free of the hindrances. It's just like tall grass, lalang. You've cut it down, even though the roots are not abandoned, they do not hinder you anymore. The hindrances are not there to hinder you at all. So these are the 7 Saddhamma and the 4 jhanas. Now we come to the next sutta, 7.7.64. The Buddha said, monks, endowed with these 7 qualities, a monk is worthy of offerings, is the world's peerless field for merit. With what 7? Monks. Herein a monk is a Dhamma knower, meaning knower, self knower, measure knower, time knower, assembly knower, noble or base person knower. And how is a monk a Dhamma knower? Herein monks, a monk knows Dhamma, the discourses or suttas. Unless he know the discourses, he should not be called a Dhamma knower. And how is he a meaning knower? Herein monks, a monk knows the meaning of this and that speech. Such is the meaning of this speech, such of that. Unless he know each meaning, he should not be called a knower of the meaning. But because he knows, such is the meaning of this speech, such of that, therefore he is called a knower of the meaning. And how is he a self-knower? Herein monks, a monk knows of self. Thus far am I in faith, in virtue, in learning, in generosity, in wisdom, and in ready wit. Unless he know this, he should not be called a self-knower. But because he knows of self, thus far am I in faith, in virtue, and so forth. Therefore he is called a self-knower. And how is he a measure knower? Herein monks, a monk knows measure in accepting the requisites, that is to say, the robe, arms, lodging, and medicines. Unless he know this, he should not be called a knower of measure. But because he knows measure in accepting the requisites, therefore he is called a knower of measure. And how is he a time knower? Herein monks, a monk knows the time thus. This is the time for recitation, this for questioning, this for effort, this for solitude. Unless he know this, he should not be called a time knower. But because he knows the time for recitation, for questioning, and so forth, therefore he is called a time knower. And how is he an assembly knower? Herein monks, a monk knows assemblies thus. This is an assembly of nobles, this of Brahmins, this of householders, this of recluses. There one should approach in such a way, stand thus, sit, speak, and be silent so. Unless he knows this, he should not be called a knower of assemblies. But because he knows an assembly of nobles, an assembly of Brahmins, and so forth, therefore he is called a knower of assemblies. And how is he a noble and base person knower? Herein monks, persons are known to a monk in 2 ways. Of 2 persons, one desires to see the Aryans, the other does not. This one who has no desire to see the Aryans is to be blamed for that reason, but the other, because he desires to see the Aryans, is to be commended. Of the 2 who desire to see the Aryans, one desires to hear Saddhamma or the true Dhamma, the other does not. The latter is to be blamed for that reason, the former is to be commended. Of the 2 who desire to hear Saddhamma, one listens to Dhamma with ready ear, the other does not. The latter is to be blamed, the former is to be commended. Of 2 who listen to Dhamma with ready ear, one, having heard it, is mindful of Dhamma, the other is not. The latter is to be blamed, the former is to be commended. Of 2 who, having heard it, are mindful of Dhamma. One tests the truth of the doctrines he has learned, the other does not. The latter is to be blamed, the former is to be commended. Of two who test the truth of the doctrines learned, one, knowing the letter and the spirit, walks in conformity with Dhamma, the other does not. The latter is to be blamed, the former is to be commended. Of two persons who, knowing the letter and the spirit, walk in conformity with Dhamma, one conforms for his own benefit, but not for others. The other conforms both for his own benefit and for the benefit of others. The person who conforms for his own benefit and not for others is to be blamed for that reason. The person who conforms both for his own benefit and for the benefit of others is to be commended for that reason. Thus monks, persons are known to a monk in two ways, and thus a monk is a knower of noble and base persons. Verily monks, endowed with these 7 qualities, a monk is worthy of offerings, and is the world's peerless field for merit. That's the end of the sutta. Here there are 7 things a monk could know. The first one is a Dhamma knower. A Dhamma knower means a person who knows the suttas or discourses of the Buddha. A meaning knower is one who knows the meaning of a speech, the meaning of this speech or that speech. He knows. A self-knower is the one who knows of himself. He has so much faith, he has so much virtue, so much learning, generosity, wisdom, ready wit, etc. A measure knower is a monk who knows measure in accepting the requisites. A time knower is a monk who knows the time, whether it is a suitable time for chanting, a suitable time for questioning, a suitable time for making effort, a suitable time for solitude, etc. An assembly knower is a person who knows this type of assembly, that type of assembly, and he knows how to act in any particular assembly. He knows how to approach, how to stand, how to sit, how to speak, or be silent. And then a noble and base person knower, you can see from here there are so many types of persons. One desires to see the Aryans, one does not desire to see Aryans. And then of those who desire to see Aryans, one desires to hear the Dhamma, another one, even though he goes to see the monks or the Aryans, he does not want to hear the Dhamma. And then of those who hear the Dhamma, one listens with a ready ear, pays attention when he hears the Dhamma, the other does not. And then the one of the 2 types of persons who hear the Dhamma with ready ear, one remembers the Dhamma that he has heard, the other does not. And then of the ones who remember the Dhamma, one tests the truth of the Dhamma he has learned. He investigates the truth of the Dhamma, the other does not. And then of those who investigate the truth of the Dhamma, one practices according to the Dhamma, another type do not practice. Even though they know the meaning, they don't practice. And then lastly, of those who practice the